Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Dom and today I'm going to provide you with a non-spoiler review of 7 Deaths of an Empire by G.R. Matthews. This book's released on the 22nd of June, so if you want to find out a bit more about it now, stick around. So, 7 Deaths of an Empire. Where do we start? I guess the natural place to start is with that title. This is a book about an empire and there are a number of deaths involved. I'll let you decide how many deaths there are, but I'm not going to force you to make a guess. So the book has 2 real storylines, and there are 2 point of view characters, one for each of those storylines. The chapters alternate between these 2 characters as well. Literally one chapter will be titled The General, and then the next will be The Magician, and so on. So the 2 characters are your General. This is a chap called Bordan. He is the beloved general of the Empire's army. He's very much at the twilight of his career, thinking about retirement. He's not quite there yet. He doesn't really want to retire, but that's the stage of his career that he is at. The other storyline we have features a magician's apprentice by the name of Kyron. He is out in the wild essentially with his master, and he's still very much learning his craft. Now, before getting into the plot itself, just a little sort of note on the structural basis of the book. At the start of each chapter we have a flashback, which is anything ranging from sort of a paragraph to, I think the longest was almost a full page on my Kindle. These flashbacks focus on one character. I won't go into who that character is for spoilers, because certainly in the first few times that we see this, it's not necessarily 100% clear who we're talking about, but it does become abundantly clear as you read more of these as the story progresses. The flashback paragraphs or flashback sections are very much one story in themselves. They kind of roughly follow on from each other, but they don't have any real relation to the actual chapter that they appear at the head of. They range from 10 years ago and at the end they get to 2 years ago, so it shows you kind of an 8-year period in this particular character's life. So onto the actual story itself, and I'm not going to give anything away by saying this because the strapline of the book, certainly on the physical advanced review copies, tell us the Emperor is dead, long live the Empire. So this happens before the story starts. Where we are essentially is the Empire at war. They've got the northern tribes and the Emperor has led his army to try and conquer these northern tribes. So they're away fighting in the forests and the Emperor has died. So we start the story with the general receiving news of his Emperor's death, and then he's got to break the news to the imperial family. On the other side, not quite of the world, but on the other side of the Empire, I guess, you've got an honour guard from the army who are transporting the Emperor's body back to the capital of Sudrim. Kyron, the magician's apprentice, and his master are going along with this honour guard, and their primary job really is to preserve the body of the Emperor. Now there's a certain sequence of events that has to happen for the succession of the Empire. The Emperor wears an amulet, and within that amulet is kind of the history of the Empire. We're talking the memories essentially of previous emperors. So there's a religious ceremony that has to take place. The new emperor will be presented with the amulet, the ceremony will take place, and then the new emperor will have access through the amulet to the memories of the previous emperors, and therefore the additional wisdom that that brings with it. So as far as General Bordan goes, he's there in the capital and he's dealing with political intrigue essentially. So you've got plots that are afoot to try to supplant Alhard, I think his name is, as the heir to the Empire. They're trying to find out who's at the heart of these plots and obviously stop them from happening. So I nearly forgot, but one final element of the plot which kind of ties these 2 main storylines together is regarding that amulet that is on the Emperor's body. So as said, the amulet plays a big part in the succession from one emperor to the next. So there's very much a race here for the honour guard and Kyron to get the Emperor's body back to the capital, Sudrim, before it can be intercepted by agents who are looking to take power for themselves. Because if those agents can intercept, if they can get the emperor's body and get the amulet for themselves, if they can get a priest to perform the ceremony of kind of succession, they can actually take over and become emperor rather than the natural heir to the empire. So that's the general gist of the plot out of the way. Let's move on to the world building. Now, as far as the world itself goes, we have a history, but we don't really explore it too much. We have certain passages where little snippets of information are provided to us. We've got your traditional kind of entryway to the city, which is a big thoroughfare lined with statues of the previous emperors, that kind of thing. The one thing that really sticks out to me about the world building is how much was borrowed from our own history. Now, obviously, with any fantasy world that you create, you are going to borrow from our own world, or you're going to borrow from other authors who in turn have borrowed from our world. And for me, the key part of it is how much you borrow and how you work that borrowing into something of your own, how you mould it into your own creation. With Seven Deaths of an Empire, for me, there wasn't enough of that moulding. This is very heavily borrowed from Roman history and the Roman Empire. So just to put a little bit of meat on those bones, with the names, for instance, lots of the names, especially of the warriors in the army, their name ends in us. So we're talking names like Boris, Maxentius, Sarimachus. We've got the arms and the armour as well. So soldiers wear the Loricus Agmata, I believe it was called. So I actually Googled this to see if it was what I thought it was, because I'm not a history buff, and it was exactly what I thought. Bleh. Kind of like that. And then with the weapons as well. So you've got instead of swords and daggers and spears, you've got a gladius and a pugio and a pila. Oh, pilum, I guess, would be the singular form there. So they're all very much taken from Roman arms and armour. The other key one for me that kind of really ground my gears a little bit is borrowing of actual place names as well. So at one point in the novel, we're talking about a city called Cesena, which is near a river called the Rubicon. Which, if you don't know, the Rubicon is very much something from Roman history as well. You've probably heard the phrase, even if you don't know what it means, about crossing the Rubicon. And this is all about Julius Caesar and kind of the final throw of the dice. Basically, once you cross the Rubicon, there's no turning back on that path of action. Both of these are in the novel and sort of really stuck out. I think those were the only place names that really that I recognise from our world, but it just seemed very strange. And we're talking here as well about fighting the northern tribes, and at that time in our history, not too much further north to the Rubicon and Cesena were the Gauls, and that's very much kind of the picture that I'm getting in my head here. Overall, it's kind of the Roman Empire with magic. So for the characters, I don't really know what to say about the characters, if I'm being honest. So you have these main two, and you've got various side characters as well, but I just kind of feel that there's not really enough on them. So starting off with Borden, and the soldiers love him, they will follow him anywhere, they will do what he says. They would commit crime for him if he ordered them to do so. They kind of wouldn't think twice about it. It kind of strikes me as odd, even though he's towards the end of his career, he's definitely an ageing general. He still joins in the battle. He gets the bloodlust when he's there. He pulls his gladius and he gets stuck in. But yet he's starting the book in the capital, kind of safe and sound with the imperial family, while the emperor is the one who's out on the front line with essentially the general's armies. And it kind of seems a little bit strange for me. Obviously it makes sense from point of view of the story, But in a realistic point of view, I struggle a little bit more with that. If nothing else, I would have expected if the Emperor was going to be there, then the General would be there as well, because he is, of course, the leader of the army. Kyron is... Kyron's quite a young magician. He's not been learning for too many years, and you can see at the start of the book in the conversations with his master Padon that he definitely has a lot to learn. He doesn't really have the ability to make a lot of the magical constructs that Padon is asking him to make. When we see battle, you've got Padon. Obviously, he's a more experienced and an older and more powerful magician, and he's creating these shields in kind of the blink of an eye against arrows and so forth. Whereas Kyron really struggles to do that. He can't essentially multitask with his magic. He struggles to close off the motes, they're called, and the kind of the strings of magic, and then move on to another one, even if it's the same thing. So like 2 or 3 shields over particular areas. He really struggles with that. And then kind of typically as the story goes on, we see almost out of nowhere, just from necessity, he's suddenly able to do a whole lot more, and it's not really explained, and it's a little bit too convenient for me. So I thought that was a little bit of a letdown. Talking a little bit about the magic, that's something which I thought was generally quite well handled, other than those slight complaints about Kyron's kind of learning and use of it. We see several points where, for instance, Kyron is out there and he's looking over at the enemy and is searching out magicians in the enemy lines, and he's casting a net over the enemy lines essentially to try and track down where magic is coming from. So you see that in a reasonable amount of detail, and I think it's quite well handled to explain how magic works without going too in depth into it. You can see as well certain I guess different spells, if you like, that are created, and whilst we're in battle, and Kyron, as I've said, is not really experienced, he's not experienced in battle as well as in magic, so you can see him trying to help by taking what magic he does know and then seeing what he can do to kind of put that to another purpose to help out in the battle. So for instance, he can create flame. What can he do with flame? Can he set people on fire? Can he create fire as a barrier? Can he create a flaming sword? That kind of thing. And it doesn't always work, and sometimes you've got the warriors around him kind of literally saying to him, yeah, that's nice, but it's not really helpful. Try something else. So I think that's quite well handled and almost comes across quite natural in that circumstance, and I really liked that. Now, in terms of the book as a whole, the plot I thought was okay. It's kind of like the characters. I struggled a little bit at first to equate my feelings on this and really see whether I liked it or, well, I didn't not like it, but it was a case of how much did I like it. I thought it was a bit of a slow burn. The pacing wasn't brilliant outside of those battle scenes. So we spend a lot of time walking, basically. We're just walking with the wagon through forests, and during that time Kyron is struggling with his magic and with what's happened. The other side of the story with Borden, I can't go too much into it in a non-spoiler review, but certain things that happen there, the consequences are quite good and I thought quite well handled. You deal at first with Elhard, the Emperor's son, the heir to the Empire, and he's not ready to be Emperor, and you can see with Borden his kind of reaction when he's dealing with Elhard. The way he feels about it. Borden knows that he's not ready, he's trying to do what he can because he's a loyal soldier and he's loyal not only to the Empire but to this particular imperial family. So you can see Borden trying to help him and kind of getting almost irritated at certain points. The political intrigue side of things, I'm not the biggest fan of political intrigue in my novels. I don't want it to take over. I feel that it slows things down a little bit too much for me, and I think that's what happened here as well. Now, the other thing that I want to mention is I was reading this obviously through an advanced review copy, and typically it will generally come with a kind of caveat at the when it's delivered to you, which says words to the effect of, "This is an unfinished, uncorrected proof, and any errors will be corrected by the time the book goes to publication." And that's fine, because you know, these things take time. There's a whole host of steps in the publication of a book, and the proofreading that would pick up the kind of the spelling and grammatical and punctuation errors. That's very much one of the last steps before publication. So you do expect perhaps a few little errors creeping in. When I was reading this book, however, it was absolutely littered with errors. Now, I shouldn't really mention that, because obviously this is an advanced review copy, and those errors should be corrected before release. However, I feel like I need to mention it here because it did have an impact on my reading of the book, and I feel that it really did slow me down in my reading whilst I was going over and double checking things, and whilst I was losing my flow, basically. And it's certainly, more than anything, impacting my enjoyment of the novel, because I was constantly picking these things up. I wasn't enjoying it as much as I felt that I would be otherwise. So with all that told, on to the actual rating of the book, and I did struggle for a little while on this, and I think for the overall enjoyment of the book that I had, a bit of a slow burn on some of the other elements in there as well, but in key, the amount that was borrowed from our world and from our history, and not, in my opinion, sufficiently changed up for a fantasy world. Those elements have led me to settling on a 3 stars out of 5 for this novel. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. I would definitely recommend people go and read the book and find out for themselves. It's not a book in any sense that I would call a bad book. It's just one that it didn't quite do it for me. I was looking forward to this book, and for me it just didn't quite get there, but obviously for you it may well do. So the last thing I want to say about the book really is regarding the title. And in fact, let's talk about the title and the cover, because we haven't done that yet. It's a good cover. I like this. It's quite striking, with that large text really standing out. The review copies there have a slightly different cover as well, with the Emperor is dead, long live the Emperor on the front, and I think on the spine. And I think that's it's quite unique, actually. Review copies often will have a slightly different cover, even if it's just that little tagline saying this is an uncorrected proof or whatever. But that one I quite like, 'cause it actually changed it up a little bit, even if the artwork itself was the same. The book is noted in the blurb as being perfect for fans of Anna Smith Spark. I've not read any of her books, so I can't comment on the correlation between the two. However, there is one of her books which was released a few years ago, which my assumption is it's the same cover artist, because the tower in the background, the mage, I assume it is, with a staff on the front, is very much lifted from that cover. So there's a little bit of, I think you might call it self-plagiarism there, assuming of course that it is the same artist. So that was a little bit strange, especially because on the back of the book it's actually been linked to that particular author, Anna Smith Spark, as well. So the other thing just to mention along with the cover is the title of the book, 7 Deaths of an Empire. So I alluded to this at the start of the video. There is an empire and there are a number of deaths. However, I'm still trying to figure out where the number 7 comes from. I'm not going to give you a number, because obviously that would spoil certain things, but I couldn't count 7 anyway. I did do a bit of a search for 7 Deaths of an Empire to see if this is a well-known phrase or a quote from somewhere, but I wasn't able to find anything that wasn't specifically relating to this book, as opposed to what this book was relating to. So if anyone has come across the phrase or quote 7 Deaths of an Empire and knows what it's all about, let me know. I'd be interested in hearing it. And there we have it then, 7 Deaths of an Empire is released on the 22nd of June, so you should be able to pre-order a copy now, and if not, it won't be long before you can get your hands on a copy of the physical book anyway. So I hope you found this video review informative, and if so, like the video, drop me a comment in the boxes below, and as always, hit the subscribe button if you want to see further content from me as I release it. I hope you have a good day. For now, take care. Goodbye.